Hey, everybody, welcome to The Thoughtful Bro. I'm so happy to be here today with Sara Shukla. This is going to be such a fun interview. Sara is one of my favorite people. We're two debut novelists talking together about the debut novelist life. We're going to talk about how to be funny and write funny because Sara knows a lot about being and writing funny. And we're going to talk about her wonderful new book called Pink Whales, which, among other things, and this is high praise for me, this is like the highest kind of praise, I found it particularly well structured. I just loved this book had just the right amount of everything in it. So we're going to get to all that in a minute. But first, The Thoughtful Bro is here every Tuesday at 2 for what makes great books tick and what makes great authors tick. And of course, we are on the wonderful, important, world-conquering platform of A Mighty Blaze on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. A Mighty Blaze is all volunteer. If you want to show the love for A Mighty Blaze or show the love for these amazing authors, just follow us or follow the authors. Follow Sara Shukla. We'll put links to her socials in the chat. At A Mighty Blaze, as I said, it's all volunteer. We're not asking for money. But if you do want to spend money, have I got an idea for you? I would say spend your money on a different kind of summer beach read. Whether you're at the yacht club, the beach club, or Sam's Club, I invite you to step inside the world of Bellinis and galas, of reserved cabanas and high-end skincare, and immerse yourself in a masterpiece of awkward people just trying to fit in. This summer, read the book that will help you answer the question, am I doing rich right? Pink Whales. That is your next read. Please look at this beautiful cover. Pick up a copy of Pink Whales as soon as you can. We're going to put the link to buy it in the chat through bookshop.org. It is a funny book. It is a satisfying book. And it is great to just put in your pocket, take on your next airplane ride, and plop down in a beach chair and enjoy. If you have a question for Sara, and especially if you're like an aspiring writer or a well-established writer for that matter, who's trying to be funny in your books, please hang around in this, and we'll get to the kind of humor writing stuff at the end, and Sara will answer any and all questions you have. So just pop your question in the chat, and we'll get to it. And now a little bit more about Sara. She is an editor for WBUR's Cognoscenti. You can find her writing on WBUR, as well as the Los Angeles Review of Books, McSweeneys, and elsewhere. She is an alum of Grub Street's Novel Incubator and the University of Virginia. Pink Whales is her debut novel. Annie Hartnett called Pink Whales, quote, delicious and hilarious with a pitch-perfect voice. And Byron Lane said it is a deep and delightful modern rom-com full of twists on love, redemption, family, and the meaning of home. A perfect read for the beach or the yacht club. Sara, welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Thank you. Should we just stop here? That was really great. I'm good.
I was sort of pumped up about my intro. I was like, I was so fired up about your book. I wrote that long intro. I mean, the poetry of awkwardness. I mean, that's one of the main topics today. All right. So, Sara, first I want to just ask, how are you? This is, I mean, for me to ask how are you to any debut novelist is a big question because I've just been through it myself, like a few months right before you, and it is probably the most, or one of the most intense times of my entire life. And I know you've had a particularly eventful few months, and I just kind of want to put it to you, just ask you, how has it been?
It's been, I paused because people keep asking me this, and my answer honestly is, I don't know. I don't really know. It's kind of blurry. It's wonderful. I had an amazing launch. I'm super stoked about the book. People seem to like it so far and are tearing through it. And it's the best is when people are like, seem surprised. Like people I know, they're like, I really liked it. Like they just read it because they know me, but they end up really liking it. So those are little hits of joy. This sort of sad bomb is that my dad died. Sorry, I laugh. It's just ridiculous. Like my dad died 2 weeks before my book published. So he was not doing well, but not that bad off. So it was a bit of a surprise. And so that's why I just, it's a little blurry and I'm not sure how I'm doing because I think that's just what you do. You just kind of, there's these two things happening at once. So I'm sad, but I'm grateful. And I'm kind of, chasing these like hits of joy. That's what I was thinking about today. As I was thinking about writing about humor and talking about humor and talking to you about it, I think that like, this stuff happens and you just kind of carry around being sad for don't know, a year, the rest of your life. I don't really know yet. We'll find out. But seeking out things that make me laugh or art that makes me happy, and just, I don't know, these hits of like a good feeling, I find myself really drawn to, and just seeking out things that make me feel good, like viscerally. Like I went to a concert in Providence last Friday with Gregory Alan Isaacoff, and at the end, the band always joins together on stage, like all together around a microphone, and they all sing together, and it's very fun. So things like that, where I'm like, okay, I can feel that too. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot, and I appreciate you sharing that with the audience about what was going on with your dad. Did you ever, because this is something I haven't been able to actually ask you yet as your friend, but I thought of asking it to you, and I've been thinking about it, is like, did you ever think of postponing your launch, or sort of not going through with a lot of the stuff that you might have had planned because of everything going on in your personal life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't. I don't even know if I could. I guess I could have postponed the launch, but I didn't. I kind of was like, we're all geared up for it, and the book's going to publish no matter what. And these two things are happening, and we're just going to do it.
Yeah.
I just thought, like, we're just going to. It's also, I don't think I'm fully in my body. Like, I'm just kind of going with what's in front of me. And I feel fully engaged. Like, we're talking for this hour, I'm like, I'm here, I'm in my body, like I'm doing okay. But in general, there was just, once I knew that was going to happen, and once it happened and I knew it happened, there's just a letting go, I think that you can't help but have. So in a way, it's just been like, well, I can't do that. Like, because we saw each other the week before he died, and Julie Gerstenblatt said, imagine everything is balloons and let these balloons go. Like, imagine the balloons go that you can't do anymore. And I've thought about that a lot. Because there's just, like we were saying in setting up this, like a Zoom light. I don't have a Zoom light or a ring light. I didn't get a ring light. There's all these things that I thought I would have done that I just didn't, because I'm just kind of barreling through and trying to grasp the moments that are good.
Wow.
Without overthinking it, like I'm doing now.
Well, thank you for being here so much. I mean, needless to say, it has been certainly one of the most intense times in your life, and just thank you for being on the show. And let's get to the book, because I loved this book. I thought that, as I said, the word Kirkus, when it reviewed the book, said that the book was a satisfying romp, and I just, like, when I read that word satisfying, I was like, that is exactly how I feel right now. There's this way that, like, especially toward the end of the book, when you sort of like kind of wrapped up each of the various kind of plot lines, and it all just sort of truly came together. I was sitting there, like, with my fingers laced across my belly, thinking, that feels good. I would just say that, like, it felt like an expert hand at work in terms of how you structured it. Did you feel that way? Or did you feel like it's like bursting at the seams and the wheels are coming off, like most writers feel?
Oh my gosh. I mean, depends when you ask me, right? Like, I think over the course of it, for sure, like wheels everywhere. I think by the final stages, it did feel like that. And it was really satisfying. And it was fun from what I remember in editing it, and like feeling it come together, like, when it clicks, like, and I think that with like a Cognoscenti essay, like with yours, and we were talking about editing yours that went up today, by the way, everybody. And it's so satisfying when you find that right line, you find the right structure, and it just clicks and you can feel it. I think it's more of a, I don't want to say vibe. It's more like a muscle memory sometimes than something you can plot out or plan ahead or think through. And when you get it, yeah, it's super satisfying.
Oh, it's so satisfying. And that's, like, to me, it's like actually the most satisfying thing, like when the story clicks, when the story kind of like all just fits together and the gears start like spinning directly without friction with each other. I mean,
yeah. And it's that like surprising but inevitable thing too, right? Like, my husband, I say it all the time with TV shows. He's like, yes, I know, satisfying but inevitable. I know, it just happened, like at the end of a show or a moment or anything like that. But I think that's what I think about a lot.
And even the very last line was just perfect. And you have a gift for last lines, because as Sara was saying, she, like, an essay of mine went up on Cognoscenti today, and Sara actually wrote the last line. She just threw it in there, and so It was the
You teed
perfect.
me up for it.
Well, you have a gift for last lines. Okay. So what is this book about? Why don't you just actually, before we go any further, just tell us in a thumbnail sketch what Pink Whales is about?
Yeah, so it is set in a coastal New England town, idyllic, not as idyllic as it seems. I love romp. I totally described it as a romp, so I love that Kirk has got me with that. It's about a young mom named Charlie who moves there with her husband. Their marriage is kind of on the rocks, and her two young kids. They're 6-year-old twins, so they're chaotic. One is a little pint-sized survivalist who reads like manuals on how to survive different worst case scenarios, and one of them just keeps kind of disappearing. He just like wanders off. So she moves there and she wants to fit in. She wants to figure things out, and then she um, gets drawn into lies, drugs, and yacht clubs by the trio of like the cool moms and like some bizarre theme parties. And it just keeps getting kind of weirder from there. And she has to figure out, is this who she wants to be, or does she want to find her way back out again and back to her life? Um,
Yeah, I think, one of the big themes of the book definitely is fitting in. I mean, I think, years ago, you were trying, like the very first time you told me about this book, you just kind of shrugged and you're like, it's just about awkward people. Like that's just, and I do think it is a masterpiece of awkwardness, as I don't get tired of saying. But
Yeah.
I think it's a lot about just, I mean, there's a lot of class anxiety because Charlie, the main character, doesn't come from a wealthy background, and here she is in a super wealthy preppy town. But just more broadly, it's about kind of how far will we go to fit in? I mean, even within her own marriage, kind of how far will we go to kind of change who we are to please the other person, and so on. So do you see that as like sort of the big all caps theme of just fitting in?
Totally. Yeah. And I think you're right that it's about in so many aspects. I think of it as belonging also,
Yeah.
like there's fitting in, which is for sure part of it. It's kind of like the what do you need versus what do you want, right? Like she wants to fit in. What she really needs is to belong someplace, but she needs to belong. Is it to a town or is it to like her relationship, to herself? Sounds cheesy, but we all need to belong to ourselves, figure out who
Oh,
we are.
that's so well, but that's so well said. That is so well said. And the marriage, I have to say, like for me, the marriage was like the best part of it. I liked. We're going to talk a little bit later about kind of how for comedy to thrive, certainly in long form narratives and like long books or maybe long TV series and so on, you need to have substance, right? And I really bought the substance, and I just the substance of this marriage between Charlie and Dev, and like this like perfect dynamic of like this super hot, super smart ex-girlfriend who is now Dev's new boss. So you have kind of like a marriage that's like stale. And there's this great line that I love. Like I'm going to quote some lines to you, but like one of my favorite was kind of summarizing the marriage. Charlie's like, I was feeling more and more like we were ships passing in the Netflix watch list. I think like everybody who's like in the middle of their lives, like us, who has like kids and a marriage that's like people are just so busy all the time. You can sort of feel like you look at your Netflix watch list way more than you actually look at your spouse. But anyway, so you have this marriage that's sort of stale, and then you have like super hot, super smart, super successful ex-girlfriend who's now the boss of the husband. I thought it was just doing all the great things that love triangles do. And I guess my question to you is just, was that like the kernel of the book? Like, was that kind of where you started the story?
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted it to be, the setting, I kind of thought of the setting first, and then thought, well, I want it to be like a couple in this sort of not quite midlife, but like messy sort of like, who are we? We're not like these young single people anymore. We're not like totally settled into our lives yet. And how you navigate that. And so then I had to figure out what's the tension. And like the hardest thing was this like zigzag between of narrative tension of like keeping them apart for most of the novel, and then keeping this sort of buzz alive of like, are they going to end up together? Are they going to find their way back to each other? Is this going to work out? Is Presley Elvis going to come in between them? What about, I had a thing published today with Boston.com, and the writer called it the hot towny carpenter, which I love. So is the hot towny carpenter going to come in between them too? And I guess going back to sort of belonging, I think it's also about desire, the novel. I think it's about like the desire to fit in, right? But to also like desire, I guess, still within your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then where that takes you. And it was fun in a novel to just be like, what if she like followed this pathway? What if she followed this pathway? Like, where can desire take you as you're trying to figure out who you are and who you want to be?
Yeah. And let's talk about the town for a second. So the town is called Rumford, and it's in New England, but I don't think you say what state it's in. And I did, or did you? I mean, I looked up. There is
Massachusetts.
It is Massachusetts. Okay.
I think it says like north of Boston.
That's right. Right. North Shore.
Like Kirkus called it Maine, which is totally fine too, because they gave me a nice review. But that was.
Yeah, so I think that's what actually threw me, because I think like, so I said to myself, like, I thought it was in Massachusetts. Then when I saw the Cricket said it was in Maine, I was like, oh, maybe I misread. And so
I didn't even notice it the first time because I was so like terrified to read it. And then I went back, I was like, Maine, but I was like, oh, but they got it. They got it otherwise, so it's fine.
Yeah. But Rumford is actually a town in Rhode Island and Maine. But I wanted to just ask you, like, so what is Rumford based on? Do you have like a personal experience in a Rumford-like town, or what?
So the answer is yes and no. It's like my most awkward answer. Like, you talk about a masterpiece of awkwardness, like you're about to see it. It is totally fiction. And I get super weird when I start talking about it because it is super, super fiction. I made it all up. But the origin story is from us. My family moved from Charlottesville, Virginia. We lived in Boston, then we lived in Charlottesville and went kind of back and forth. It's what we do, apparently. We move between places. And we landed in Marion, Massachusetts, which is on the South Coast. I like Mattapoisett and almost on the Cape. We're like 15 minutes from the bridge. Anyway, so we landed here just briefly before moving to Rhode Island. And I wrote the book in Rhode Island. When we moved here, I was like, oh, this is funny. Like, this town has a vibe and it's got a personality. And like, I don't think I got the memo. Like, I would just show up places and be like, there was a memo. And I didn't get it. Like, I'm wearing a flannel. I'm talking about something weird. And they're like, it's just not landing. Like, and there's very nice people here. We have plenty of friends. Like, it's, I'm there now, actually. We're recording live from Marion, Massachusetts. But this summer now,
I suddenly feel underdressed for this podcast.
I know.
Knowing that you're there.
Yeah. So I had to put on my fancy necklace. My summer is just like walking around and going to the beach and seeing friends and being like, it's not about here. You're not in it. Like, the amount of people that have been like, who's this person? Who's that person? And I get it. Like, it's fun. And I hope it just sells books, and I need to just kind of get out of the way and like embrace the awkwardness. But genuinely, I took the premise and I tried really hard to fictionalize anything else and not have it accidentally sort of mimic anything I see here. So I think I said it north of Boston. And my friend, whose bookstore, I went to a bookstore in Beverly Farms Sunday, and she was like, is it Marblehead? Like, it seems like that too. So hopefully it can be whatever beach you want it to be, or whatever beach town. Pick your favorite yacht club, and it's that one.
Yeah, exactly. We all have our own Rumford. Everybody has their own private Rumford. I love, there's another great line in there where, so Charlie's always trying to like figure out how to talk to these Rumford people and like, what's the lingo? And and this one woman is talking to her, and she's like, I'm weekending here. And then Charlie's like, oh, you're weekending here. So where do you week? Like, where do you spend your week?
From like college sorority rush was the first time that I'd ever heard summer used as a verb. And it was like a college joke. And she texted me when she read that line, and she was like, you use summer as a verb.
Yes. But I love weeking as a verb. Like, I just,
yeah,
I'm daying in this house and weeking in this house. Anyway, all right. So one of the things that was interesting to me about the process of writing this novel is you told me that you started out, and I actually find this is a quite typical story, and it's a story that happened to me in my own way, and it has happened. I feel like it has happened to, when you talk to debut novelists, which I do a lot on this show, this is the majority of cases are as follows, which is that you wanted to write a literary novel, and just you can, for those who are not watching the show, just imagining my nose sticking way up in the air when I say literary, New Yorker style award winning, all the things. But then you sort of were like, meh. And you just sort of like, I'm just going to write something funny. I'm going to write something that gives me joy. I'm going to do something that I want to do. And then suddenly, lo and behold, it all starts flowing for you. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think I made that actual noise. I think I was like, yeah, and then just did it. Yeah, Michelle Hoover, who runs the novel incubator, we call her the novel whisperer. I think she reminded me of that. She said, when I was talking to her, she said, do you remember when you just said, I think it just wants to be a funny novel, and I need to just embrace that? Because I think as I was doing the incubator for that year, I was reading a ton, we're learning all these different things, and I kept trying to hedge it towards like this or that, or use this voice, or feel like the characters, like talk about the marriage being sort of a central through line, a central character, I guess, in itself in the novel. And I think I remember just trying to get really emo with it. And then once I was like, you can pull back, Sarah, like you can have fun. You can show like a snapshot of them connecting. And then I don't know. So I just started taking it less seriously, and I had so much more fun. And then once I started having more fun with it, I wanted to go back to it. And I found that the funny bits and sort of the embracing of making it funny not only kind of hit the way I could write. And I find that's with cogs too, is you have to just, when I'm writing like even a short essay, you just have to find that rhythm. And once you find the rhythm that feels natural to you, you can just, again, that muscle memory of like feeling the beats, where I think you're like, no, this is hitting here, this needs this here. And if you're not really just fully like embodying how you're supposed to write, nobody's supposed to write anything, but like what feels right to you, and maybe what you take in as a writer. Like I think I take in a lot of humorous fiction. I watch a lot of TV, like so much TV. And we can talk about that later. But I think like it developed sort of a rhythm and a style based on what I enjoy, right? So then if I'm putting out something that I'm enjoying, because writing's not fun. Like it's not fun to just sit here and just like, my room's not usually this dark, but I'm sitting in a dark room basically, and like just type into a box, and you never know if anybody's going to read it or not. So I think you have to find what you like to do, and you find what makes your brain like ignite a little bit, and then it makes you want to like keep sitting down and doing the hard thing that may or may not ever come to anything.
Well, you've also said to me that you thought if you really went with this kind of humorous way of telling the story in your own voice, that humorous voice of yours, you actually would have something to add. And by implication, you trying to write this, I guess, somewhat relatively inauthentic literary novel wouldn't really be adding anything to the world. I love that comment that like just really being yourself and having fun also is the thing that means you have something to say.
Yeah. That's smart of me. I don't remember when I said that, but I like it. And I embrace, totally own it. I take ownership of that comment. Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think, being authentic sounds so cheesy, but I think it's really just, and again, this is kind of my blurry state, I think now, of being like, what really matters? Like, I think it's like, I don't know, what matters is what you can put out in the world and who you are, and sort of embracing like the little weirdness that makes you you. I think that's what makes people unique and interesting and funny. And if you're just trying to fit some other mold, I just don't think it's ever going to work. I think you got to just embrace it. I've said this to like every single person I've talked to this week, and to my husband like 25 times, but I was listening to this interview a week ago, maybe a little longer, with Jack Antonoff on NPR. And he was saying, it was about grief, and art. And he said that songwriting, this is a paraphrase, but that songwriting is an act of optimism. It's like the ultimate act of optimism, because you're just sitting there and you don't know if anyone's ever going to hear it. It can be the saddest song that anyone's ever written, but it's still an optimistic act because it's art that you're putting out into the world. And maybe it'll exist, maybe it doesn't. And I think books are the same way. I think writing's the same way. Like it exists to you, but like you don't really know if it's going to exist to anybody else until you've sat there in the room and done all the hard work and gone back to it and cried a little bit, come back, and so I think it's an act of optimism.
And can I just use that to pivot slightly off
Trying or
topic here and talk about like sort of like this pet peeve I have about the entire conversation around AI generated art. Okay.
oh,
Oh yeah. Okay. And so like in 10 seconds or less, the context of what I'm about to say for anybody who might not understand it is just that there's a lot of anxiety in the literary world and certainly in other artistic fields too about the way AI will just start generating novels and in fact already has started generating novels, and it's hard to kind of like tell the difference between what's a quote, well, not quote, but like a human flesh and blood generated novel and, you know, an AI generated novel. But here's the thing. And it's like, I mean, whatever on like the marketability of that and whether consumers will like those novels or care that those novels are written by computers. But I just think like part of the conversation that's just missing is how so much of the reason why art exists is for the sake of the artist. So the artist can like, number one, have a good time alone in their room, right?
yeah.
Number two, come to terms with things like grief, and, you know, make an optimistic act of like, hey, I have felt all these things and struggled with these things, whatever they are. And now I'm going to put them into your mind and share them with you so you can feel them and talk to me about them and so on, right? Like that whole side of like why art exists is sort of like not really talked about in the AI conversation. Anyway, your comment made me think of that.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So moving on, I want to agree. I want to talk about how to be funny because so I like used to think that I was like funny as a writer and I wanted to be, that was like the first thing I wanted to be is funny. I wanted to be like a stand-up comedian when I was a kid. And I'm revealing this now in public for the first time in my life. And it's deeply humiliating for me.
I'm honored.
Yes. But I've probably submitted about 12 or 14 different pieces to McSweeneys, and never once have they accepted anything of mine. But many people have, right? But you not only have gotten through, but you have written like one of the best McSweeney, like the all-time pantheon of McSweeney's funny pieces.
It's my one McSweeney.
But you can retire after that.
They're very nice about it.
There's nowhere to go but down from there. That is like among the funniest pieces ever on McSweeney's. So folks, we're going to post a link to it in the chat. It's called Hey Girl, It's Me, the Ball Pit. Can we talk? And it's about a COVID slimed ball pit that wants to reunite with the girl who doesn't come back anymore. It's so great. I just want to cry thinking about it. Anyway, so my first question to you.
Masterpiece. I mean,
yes.
Embrace your voice.
There's the masterpiece of awkwardness, which is your novel, and then there's the ball pit masterpiece, the great American ball pit literature that is your McSweeney's piece. But can I just like ask you like about like how did you do it? I mean, other than be like hilariously funny, like have you struggled like the rest of us to get into McSweeney's?
Totally. Yeah. So that was just like a lightning strike. Like I think you go through seasons or phases, and I think I was editing it Cog at that point. But I was new to it. And so I was like talking to people about writing, and then I had written for Cog, and I don't think I was revising then. I don't remember, but I just remember it was a time when I was trying to write a lot of short pieces. I think it was during the pandemic. So it was like this time when talking about hits of joy, right? It was another time when everything just felt kind of muted and sad. And I was like, ooh, like, let's try this. Like writing feels good. And you know what feels good? Getting little pieces of writing published. I totally recommend it. And so I think it was just divine inspiration with the ball pit. I was reading a lot of humor and I was trying it. And then that was the first one I did. And I know so many people who were like, yeah, I did one, like the first one I did, and then I couldn't get back in. And I have a lot of friends like Lisa Borders and Miriam Jairatna and Victoria Shulevich. Like I have like all these funny friends that are like in it all the time. You guys Google all of them. They're so funny. Yeah.
But I guess the real question is, should there be a support group for people who get rejected from McSweeney's? And I think there should be.
There is. I think there's a Slack group actually that might exist. But what's funny is like, you know, the editor, Chris, is by all accounts, very nice guy who lives in Massachusetts. Like he's, you know, it's not like it's not like this storied sort of wonderland. It's just people like me, like that edit and that say like, this is the right fit, or this totally gets there, or this doesn't. And so I think, and also starting at COG and then pitching all these pieces, I think it all made me less precious about it. Like, so that I can sit here and be like, I don't know, there's an editor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yep.
I can say from like the other side of the curtain that it's not like as an editor, you're sitting there being like, when is he going to stop submitting? You know?
Well, it's funny because like I feel that exact same way about hosting a podcast and like saying no to people who pitch me, because like I get a lot of pitches to be on my show, and it's just, for me, it's like the reason why I say no to people is mostly because I'm just so busy, and it's like, and the schedule is already full, and I can like only do so many episodes. I can barely do one a week, and usually it's more like every other week. So usually the schedule is just full, but also it's like when something comes through, it's like, it's just like being like submitting to try to get an agent or submitting to try to get a publisher. It's like, it's often so random. Like, I don't know why something strikes me as interesting, or it's like whether I'm consistent. And certainly me saying no to somebody being on Thoughtful Bro is in no way a referendum on if that book is a quality book. Like I just, because like all I've seen is like a pitch that I've spent like 5 seconds looking at. And anyway, that's all helped me kind of like emotionally deal with when I like send my book out to try to find a publisher and so on. I know there's somebody like me on the other end who's just like, I'm super busy and I'm trying to just like sift through 1,000 emails. And so anyway, just don't take it so hard. Everybody's just a human who's on the other end of that.
Yeah. And just like, good for you for putting it out there. Like with McSweeneys, I think for a time I was doing a lot of humor writing, and I was, so just to like be clear about how much I was rejected too. I don't remember how many, but I knew it though. I would send pieces that I was like, this isn't very good, but we'll just see if it, and it didn't work. And then, but what I found is that to do that, it's just like anything. It's like muscle memory, like do it over and over again. So like my friends that are really great humor writers, they do it a lot. They just do a lot of humor writing pieces, and they kind of, I think you can find sort of a formula, just like anything. Like I think there's a formula for COG in a way. There's a formula for novels. Like I was telling somebody the other day at a book signing how I never thought I could write fiction. I didn't know it. I thought it was just, I thought that people who wrote fiction had magical brains and like couldn't turn off the characters, and it was just always there. And when I started learning about it and started trying to write it, and it just finding out that there was like a whole structure, that there's all these puzzle pieces and there's all these tricks and there's all these, rules, like loosely. And I was like, oh, it's not just magical brains. Like it's just anything else. You just have to kind of do it over and over again. And with the novel, it just takes longer, but.
Yep. But I agree. It is a formula, and you have to learn it. And, it's just, a formula is like such a taboo word almost among, creative types, but it's like, I mean, look, you can call it whatever you want, but it's just like, you just have to get the hang of it, just like anything else.
Yeah. You have to have the right stuff to add to it, I guess, right? Like your own ingredients that stand out and that are surprising, like you were saying. I love that. But
okay, so here is a thing about being funny that I wanted to talk about. And I sort of had an insight about what makes people good humor writers, as opposed to me, who sometimes my book is like a little bit funny, but it's like not really the kind of book I write. I mean, I think I write more serious stuff. And so I was watching Pete Davidson on Saturday Night Live one time, and it was right after there was a huge global catastrophe that happened, and I don't even want to bring up which one it was because I don't want to depress people, but like there was some big terrible thing that had happened, and he comes on that week on Saturday Night Live, and he says, when news broke of this thing, I did what I always do in a crisis. I try to make people laugh. And I thought about that, and I was like, if I was I was part of that crisis too, in the sense that I'd heard about it and people were talking about it, but it's like, it is not at all my instinct, my like kind of deep crisis instinct to try to make people laugh. No. And so I thought it was just like sort of interesting to me to think about that as like a fill in the blank. And so it's like, well, in a crisis like that, I always try to what? And for me, it was to give people something to hope in. Like I am a very optimistic person, and like that is like so what my book that just came out is all about. It's about hope. And like hope is all over that book. And that's what people respond to. And that's what people talk about. And I think if you're going to like live with a project for a really long time and try to be a serious artist and put your art into the world, that deep crisis mode, that like essential reaction to life, I think is always going to come out. Now, look, you are very funny, but and so I don't want to say you're going to have the same reaction as Pete Davidson, but I'm just kind of curious, like, could you fill in that blank for me? Like, so in a crisis, I always try to.
I'm totally Pete Davidson. I haven't dated Pete Davidson like most other people have, but no. See, I'm trying now to be funny. You had to turn it off sometimes. No,
wait, is this podcast a crisis? Is that why you're trying to be? No,
my whole life is a crisis right now. No, I'm just like a walking around like joke machine trying to get through the day. Yes, totally. And I think you're right. Like your book is like, it's hopeful, it's genuine is what I was going to say. There's like an earnestness to it that mine, I had to make sure I wasn't being too snarky sometimes. And that my editor was very good with that, where she was like, remember Mean Girls? And Mean Girls was like a framework that I returned to again and again, because it's fun, first of all. But I thought it was just really fun to be like Mean Girls, but moms and yacht clubs. And it kind of gives you some structure to play with of like a trajectory. But she said, we want to make sure that like in Mean Girls, Katie comes in and she sort of idolizes the plastics, right? And so you want your character to kind of want the thing that, even though as the writer, you're like, I don't know about these people, like she needs to want it and it needs to be sort of shiny and enticing. So I wouldn't say I had to pull back on the snark. Maybe that's what I just said here, but like, maybe that's not totally accurate. But for sure, like in a crisis, I go to laughing. And I think, it's what I reach to also. For me personally, like just as a life raft and a relief valve, like last night, like really sucked. I'll just say that. Like it's a really hard night. I helped my mom with something and she's wonderful, but like it's hard. It's a hard time. And like, so grief comes and goes and it does these different things. And it's overwhelming. And we're going to Virginia this weekend for a service for my dad, like a more localized one where he grew up. And, so I'm just pivoting from like kids to grief to loss to books to anyway. I came home really late. I mean, 10 is it's so late. And my husband and I, we watched Hacks. And he was like, we're gonna turn this on. We're gonna watch it. And it was so funny. I felt so much better. And I was thinking of this conversation and I was like, yeah, like this is it. This is what you need. There was some joke in it that just surprised me and it was sharp and funny. And it just loosened something in me. So for me, that is a huge coping skill and a coping mechanism. My dad is always very funny. I grew up like watching Get Smart with him. I just remember like rolling on the floor laughing with that shows on Nick at Night. Dating myself, but it wasn't like the original Nick at Night. It was like the reruns. So I'm not going that far back, but yeah. So I think it's something I've always reached for, and it's something I'm for sure reaching for now, like compulsively.
Can I ask, did your dad read Pink Whales?
He did. So not the clean, like not the good version. And it's funny, that wasn't even, I've thought about that so much because I think it's the natural thing to ask, but I didn't really care that much. Like I cared that he saw it come out. I cared that he knew it was happening, that I'd worked so hard and my parents had watched my kids and it was the fact of the accomplishment, the strong finish. He was big on strong finishes. But it hasn't been that big a thing to me that I'm like, did you read it or what did you think? It was more like I did it,
Yeah.
He read an earlier version that had some bits that I cut, and that's my lesson to my advice to everybody. Wait till you do the final version, because sometimes there's some scenes you wish your dad hadn't read. I'll just say that.
Oh my gosh. All right. So look, I want to do like sort of a lightning round actually on some of these tips for humor writing thing. And then we're going to take a few questions from the audience. Okay. But we're running low on time. So let's just sort of whip through these. Okay. So writing humor, tip number 1, build slowly into absurdity. Like don't start on the most absurd thing, but start on something that's recognizable and then build toward it. Yeah. Expand.
So I think you don't want to confuse the reader, first of all. Like, you want to have like a clear premise, and you don't want to just kind of hit them out of left field, right? And be like, this is so wacky, isn't it? Like, you have to draw them in. They have to trust you first, right? They have to feel like you're, it's like Dan Savage used to, this is like from a million years ago, and I used to listen to Dan Savage's podcast, and he would say, like, when you go on a date, you want to be, oh my God, what's the word? Have good judgment. You want to show good judgment. You don't want to come at them with all your weird stuff, like, all at once. So you want to be a person. So your novel should show good judgment. I think too, I was thinking back to something that Annie Hartnett told me like way early on, because we read Swamplandia, which I loved. I haven't read it for a million years, but about halfway through it gets, or maybe at 3/4, I don't remember. It takes a turn where you're like, where are we? What just happened? And I remember her saying, you can do that. If you build the reader's trust, then in the second half of the book, you can take it in these different directions and they'll go with you because you've built up that relationship with them. You have good judgment.
Okay, which builds into writing humor tip number 2, which I think is like sort of related, which is that you should have humor, but the humor like can only be like a sauce or an icing on the main protein of the story. Icing on protein, delicious. But the idea being that like you have to have real stakes, real characters, and then only then can you actually sustain like something like a novel. I'm curious also for your point of view about like whether that also applies to something very, very short. Do you need kind of a real like normal dramatic situation in order to create something funny even in a short situation? But regardless, in the case of a novel, in the case of something longer, you believe that the finding real stakes are important.
I think so. Yeah. I think you just need that anchor. I think you need a reason for people to care in something short or in something long. I mean, care deeply about the ball. Maybe you don't care deeply about like the ball pit's point of view, but like it's absurd that like we're talking about ball pits in a pandemic and it's so gross and it's a moment in time. And that was from like a real news article, I think, that the impetus. But for a novel, like
well, the ball pit showed some great vulnerability in that pice. I mean, the ball. Yeah. So I was attached to the stakes of that, and the ball pit's putting himself out there.
Yeah, I know. Poor ball pit. I don't think it worked out. I just don't think it worked in the end. But yeah, I think so. You need the anchor, you need the stakes, you need a reason. Again, I think good judgment. Like you need a reason for people to like want to be there with you, to be like, I care about what's happening. Like you're not just there to entertain. You're there to, yeah, I think of icing, and I think it's just a good delivery system. But everything goes back to relationships, and I think tension and stakes and vulnerability and all the human things that you put into your art, right? Like whether it's a song or it's a McSweeneys, maybe vulnerabilities in McSweeneys. I don't know. It's more absurd, but yeah, that's the engine for sure. And that was something that I think that was a line that I sort of had to balance, that it was much easier for me to think of like a funny scenario or a physical comedy sort of like scene in my head. But then I had to keep saying, well, what do we care about? Like, what's this person want? What's the end goal? Like, what are we worried about? So the hard thing I think about writing a novel at all, funny or not, is that, right? Is sustaining this desire and these questions of tension and stakes through the whole thing. And so that was something I had to keep going back to.
Well, and that's something that I just care about so much. And I find myself, in writing groups, which I'm sure you're in, probably in your own circle of writing groups, the novel incubator being one of them, but that I'm always just giving that feedback, like, why are we here? What is the scene about? What do these people want? What are they trying to do? What's point A? What's point B? What's the kind of the leaning forward, moving through? And just like what was so impressive about your book, just kind of by any standard, but I think particularly by the standard of comedic novels, was just like how well put together the story was. And it's no mystery to me now hearing you talk about it, like, and hearing you say, like, what do these people want? And, what do they care about? And why should we care? Like, obviously when someone talks like that, then I'm like, oh, they get it. They get the whole stakes. Yeah, you get it. You get it. But Anyway, I mean, I'm just I just want to say like it was just so impressive to me, like how again, I think I might be repeating myself here, but it was sort of like a kind of well-balanced meal. I'm just like, there's like just enough potatoes, just enough steak, just enough asparagus, just enough béarnaise sauce, you know. And that was a very country club, yacht club kind of dinner, I think I just
Yeah,
laid out there.
that's great. I'm like, what is the béarnaise sauce? I love it. I feel like one of the people that ask me like, who's this character? Is this couple in town?
Well,
And I
you've
also like
just
béarnaise sauce.
you've just opened up the yacht club part of my brain. I didn't even know it was there.
I love it. It's there.
Let's take a few questions from the audience. Here we go. Renee asks Sarah. Hold on, I'll put this question up. Here we go. Renee,
Okay.
Sarah, how long did it take you to write this novel? And do you have a number of books that didn't get published as well?
So this was my first attempt, just like my McSweeneys. But I didn't
God,
know. But it wasn't like
you're gonna
it
make
was
me cry.
what? I did, I did.
It's all just so easy for you, Sarah. Just
Oh
one
my God.
try and
It took so long. Yeah. No, this being my first novel does not mean that it wasn't like an arduous process. I wrote it. I started taking just like fiction classes in Providence when my third child was like maybe he was 2. Um, Something like that, because I was like, I gotta do something. I'm gonna do something, and I need to like do something with this part of my brain that has been a little bit dormant, other than watch a lot of TV. So I think that was like a year to 18 months that I bumbled my way through to get a full draft. And then I applied to the novel incubator. And then blessedly I got into the novel incubator. And I like everybody that gets in, I think everybody, I was like, I wrote a novel. Like, here's a novel. Here's the one. This is what, they're gonna help me like edit it, do some line edits. Oh my God. So then over the course of the novel incubator, you generally learn that you have like 3 good sentences and keep those, throw the rest out because you do full group workshops, full class workshops. So you have 10 people reading your whole draft. So I rewrote it twice, I think, in there, like big tear apart revisions, like full characters, like it's unrecognizable to what it was. And then that version I revised over maybe a year and a half because it was like in seasons again, like the pandemic happened at the end of our novel incubator year. And so I wasn't like at home with my 3 kids, with my husband, like living on a sailboat, running an ER, being like, let me revise my novel. Like I just shut down. But then I went back to it. So I think maybe the total is 5 years. But it was a lot of like patience and a lot of just being like, now is when I can get into it and now is when I can't. And this is when I have the brain space and this is when I don't. So I think that's like being real about it.
And just real quick, if you could summarize or just pick one thing that you think back to that draft that you initially brought into the incubator, right?
Yeah.
Just pick like one general theme that was like something that you were doing then that you changed or that you wouldn't do now. What did you fix?
Oh, you know what a big one was timeline? I think it was like a year. I think I had like a school year or something. And I did I think I plotted it like by seasons and like a school year. I don't even it's hard. I think I blocked a lot of that out. It's a little bit like childbirth, um but it was just wandering and meandering. And Michelle Hoover is very good about timelines and saying like you need a ticking clock, right? You need like start about stakes, ticking clocks, like a tight timeline. And so eventually I cut it down to like 6 weeks in the summer. And that's huge. Like I found that when I could like hold pieces of it in my hands almost, I could understand it and see it. But I didn't need to show like all these things over the course of a year. And you lose the sense of urgency. So I made it 6 weeks, this like July through the end of summer. So then it's just a series of parties and it kind of tells the story through those. And then it's so much more fun. Like you talk about the structure and things fitting together, and then it can make like the chapters really short, or I could just have these scenes be tight. And the tighter I could get them, the more fun it was for me. Because it felt I could feel that momentum and it just felt like I don't know, just felt like a good rhythm, I guess, a rhythm that felt good to me. Yeah.
Yeah, momentum is something a lot of books lack, and your book did really well in momentum. I loved it. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Last question from Ellen. What's the trick to managing all of the secondary characters, especially the club ladies?
The club ladies. Oh man. Again, I would just like to thank my best friend, the TV, maybe. No. Um, I think, I had so much fun with it. I thought about it in my head, like these little scenes, and I really loved, thinking of one thing that helped, was, like, picking sort of different personality traits for each secondary character and then just honing in on them and having them, like, Poppy wears a lot of, like, white tennis skirts or something like that, and she's, like, really competitive and always, like, organized and has a bunch of clipboards. So I would just take, like, a character trait and then try to build on that in absurdity. So there's another thing where, like, starts out as, like, a pretty, you know, if not regular person, because no one in Renford is regular, but, then sort of building on the absurdity of this one character trait. And a little bit of it is, slightly cartoony, I think, which was fun to embrace because I did take, like, the Mean Girls framework, so then I could say, "Well, there's these 3 moms, like, what are their kind of archetypes and who are they?" And I think they start out a little bit cliché and then hopefully, ideally, and successfully, according to, like, a couple Amazon reviews that I've read, I'm scared to scroll down the page, but a couple, they become deeper and more, three-dimensional, I guess, and surprising, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, look, Sara, this has been amazing. Folks, the book is called Pink Whales, and it is a very well-structured, delicious smorgasbord of awkward people seeking belonging. And so the last question I always ask everybody, Sara, on my show is, imagine the perfect reader for Pink Whales, and imagine that they are just kind of getting the book in just the way you hoped they would get it in your wildest dreams. And just tell us, at the end of the book, they finish it, they close the book, it's sitting on their lap. What is, in a phrase or even just a single word, what feeling do they have?
Oh my gosh. I think they just wanna have had a fun time. I'd love for them to be I'm thinking they're on the beach, finish the last line, they throw the book in the sea next to them, and they're like, I'm about to curse. I'm not gonna curse. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on your show.
You
Like,
can.
God damn it, that was good. That's what I want.
And then they just, and
It's
then
kinda like, "Oh, man, like, that
yeah,
was fun. That was a fun ride."
I have such a visual of that, like chucking the book. I love the kind of like the scene that you just painted in my mind. They just sort of chuck the book on the seat next to them, and then
Yeah.
they go for a dip in the sea, just like
Yep,
that.
that's it. Part of
What
that's
a
me kind of being like, if I read something that's funny and that I really like, I'm kinda mad, like, a little mad that I didn't write it, so that's a little bit of me being like, "Yeah, I want 'em to just have fun." I should have said.
I'm so tempted right now to like say the last line of the book because it's so good that I actually have memorized it. But I'm not going to. But people, when you buy this book, because I know you will, read to the end and read that last line because it's a humdinger, as they say. Sara, thank you for coming on the show. One last time, folks, the book is called Pink Whales, debut novelist Sara Shukla. Catch her now before she's world famous. Sara, this has been great. I know your last month of your life has been insane. I really appreciate you making some time.
Thanks for having me. It's a quick hour. That was so much fun.
Wasn't it? What, so fun.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining. Had a big crowd today. We'll see you guys soon on Thoughtful Bro. Thanks, Sara.
Thanks, guys. Bye.